I got married yesterday evening after everything was over, and my dad finally showed up, and we exchanged words that made him cry. For some background, my fiancé and I got engaged about 5 months ago, and since neither of us wanted a large wedding with lots of people in a big venue, he rushed back in regret after skipping my wedding for his favorite son's camping trip. Now, I feel terrible because of that. This was a really special day because we were getting married on the day of our 4th anniversary together. So even though it was a small wedding, it was obviously still not possible to reschedule because we still had decorators and caterers coming in. Instead, we chose to have our wedding in our backyard with just our family and friends because we wanted to keep it as private, small, and intimate as possible. Not because my dad was asking me to reschedule my wedding for something important, but rather because my golden child brother was in town and had planned a camping trip for the same weekend, which is why I was unable to grant his request to postpone it more than just because I didn't want to. I'm not even making it up. And I don't think it was important to do such a thing. I don't think I could have ever imagined that I would be able to make something as ridiculous as this up. In any case, last week my dad called to tell me that he wouldn't be able to attend my wedding if I had it this weekend due to a medical emergency. It was a very weak excuse because I couldn't think of any, and I pressed him until he finally told me the truth. He admitted that he had accepted a camping trip that my brother had planned for him as a surprise, but that it fell on the dates of my wedding. I believe it should be fairly clear what the decision should have been. But for my dad, the camping trip was the top priority because he only spends a few weeks with his brother each year and does not want to miss any time with him while he is here. He attempted to explain to me that I tried to explain to him that the date we were getting married was really important to me. But after talking to him for a while, I kind of knew that it was pointless because he had already made up his mind and was going on the wedding, so it was going to be easy to reschedule. It wasn't like I was having a huge wedding in the first place. All I had to do was tell a few people that I had done so and speak to the vendors. My brother M is 3 years older than me and has always been an overachiever, while I've just been an average kid, so naturally he got a lot of attention from everyone and was always praised, while I kind of got overlooked. I used to feel really jealous of him and wanted to be happy for him, but I just couldn't. Going camping with my brother did not surprise me because he had chosen my brother because, to be honest, he has always been the golden child. Our parents divorced when I was in middle school, so I was relieved to see him go to college because he was a brat with a huge, overinflated ego who knew he was pretty great at a lot of things. I suppose all the attention he had always received made him pretty arrogant, and he truly believed that he was God's gift to mankind. In other words, he was insufferable and a bit of a bully to me, so we never got along. In spite of everything, I would say that the divorce was something that everyone had anticipated. The only thing that had been unexpected was the fact that my mother had ended up having an affair with one of her college friends. The divorce was extremely nasty and left everyone feeling very bitter about it. But fortunately, my dad agreed to a shared custody arrangement with my mom. I was shocked to learn that my parents were divorcing because, as far as I could recall, they had never been happy together, even in the happy memories of my early years. When we were out with other people or on vacation or holidays, they would put on a happy front for the sake of the family, but that was only for show. There were weeks when they hardly spoke to one another, looked at one another, or even slept together. Separate rooms. I'm fairly certain that my parents had fallen out of love with one another and were only living together for the sake of it. Neither of them took any action to change that. So my mom ended up having an affair, and I'm not defending her, but my dad had never been a pleasant man to live with, because he had been going through a particularly difficult time in their marriage when she had an affair. My mother finally told him the truth about her affair and left the house, but she continued to communicate with her children, or at least tried to, and I was the only one who would reply to her messages. My brother ignored her because he could never bring himself to forgive her for cheating on our father. She had been fighting violently almost daily and had started hitting the bottle, which seemed to make the arguments worse. As we grew up, my relationship with my dad was strained at best, and after the divorce, when I chose to keep a friendly relationship with my mom and my brother, it was expected that he wouldn't be able to forgive her because he and my brother had always had a very special bond. From the time we were young, I could tell that my dad had a favorite, despite his insistence that he didn't. My mom married my stepdad a few months after the divorce was finalized, and I was a bridesmaid at her wedding while my brother refused to even attend. She still had partial custody of us. So whether my brother liked it or not, he probably started to resent me because he was very distant from me after that. I believe he had wanted me to act the same way that my brother had been, disparaging our mother and her husband constantly, would have to live with our mother for half the month, and he would be unbearable for those few weeks, especially since my mother did not show preference for us. I suppose that did not sit well with him, because he was unable to get away with his awful behavior. On multiple occasions, my dad even attempted to apply for full custody because he thought my mother and her husband were torturing his son, but his claims were unfounded, so he was unable to obtain custody of us. I was very young and unsure about whether I should be okay with my mom, despite the fact that she had cheated on my dad, but after a while, I just decided that I would do whatever made me happy, and having a good relationship with my mother made me happy. I'm glad that I put in the time and effort to build a good relationship with my mother, because at least I had one parent who cared about me, and my stepdad was a pretty nice guy. So it's not like I hated him either. Relationship with her and spent time with her as we lost her to the Great Sea approximately 6 years ago. I am extremely thankful for the time we had together, and regardless of her marital status, she was always a good mother to me, and that's what counts. Even in her final days, my brother was rarely present, but he made the effort to visit her a few times, which I believe gave her some peace before she passed away. My stepdad left the state a few months after she died, but we stayed in contact. About a year after my mother's death, my brother received a job offer that required him to move to London, which he accepted. He now resides there and returns once a year to spend a few weeks with our father, which is why he's here right now. My brother and I no longer communicate, but after my mom's death and my brother's departure, we had actually begun to improve He said he was sorry for being cold to me after learning of my mother's affair, because he felt betrayed and hurt by many things, and ended up acting in ways he was not proud of, especially with me. He admitted that he had always given my brother more attention than to me, which is why our relationship was so tense and challenging, but he said he wanted to work on it, so we did. I asked him to walk me down the aisle on my wedding day, and he agreed. I knew for sure that he was still very attached to my brother, but I didn't mind that as long as he continued to treat me like a daughter that he loved. But after what happened recently, I thought that things had finally started to change. For the past couple of years, we had actually been getting along well, which I didn't even think was possible. He had only bothered to try to mend our relationship because my brother had left for London and would only be here for a few weeks each year, so I was important to him, but only while my brother was here. I realized that he would never truly treat me like a priority as long as he was here. And this recent incident was a harsh wake-up call because I could hardly change anything. I was furious at the time and will admit that what I did was to agree to postpone my wedding because I thought my dad was asking me to reschedule it so that we could go camping with his son. I did this in the heat of the moment, and minutes after I ended the call with my dad, I was on another call, this time with my stepdad, and I asked him to walk me down the aisle. My stepdad was invited to the wedding as a guest anyway, because I had previously mentioned that he was a nice guy, and I didn't have a problem with him, and he was the only person who got me through my mom's funeral, so even though we don't talk, often we are still close. It was quite vindictive, and was done solely with the spirit of revenge, but I thought I was doing the right thing for myself so I could teach my father a lesson. He was initially hesitant to accompany me down the aisle, because he knew my father would also be there, but after a few seconds he agreed, and I didn't really think much of it because I believed that, despite the fact that what I was doing was trivial, it was well deserved, and my fiancé agreed, which was all the confirmation I needed, because my dad hadn't even bothered to stay in contact for the past week, and I knew it was because my brother was back in town, which only made things worse. Yesterday, I got married, and my dad wasn't there, which was to be expected because I had been waiting for a miracle to happen, but he never did. My stepdad escorted me down the aisle, and don't get me wrong, I'm happy about that. It was my wedding day, so I'm obviously very happy about how it went. I feel bad about everything that happened last night. I asked one of my cousins to take a picture of me from my phone while I was walking down the aisle and send it to my dad. I expected him to be upset after I sent him a picture of me being walked down the aisle by my stepdad, but I didn't expect him to actually board the next bus and return home so he could talk to me, to my dad, and she did. A few hours later, he noticed it, and I thought it was a little strange, but I was too busy with the wedding lunch and other things to give it much thought. At around 8 o'clock in the evening, when the guests had begun to depart, my dad finally arrived. My brother was with him, and they both appeared worn out, but it was my dad who spoke, and he apologized profusely for not thinking seriously about my wedding. But now that he was back, he wanted me to have another ceremony the following day, so that he could be there for me and finally walk his little girl down the aisle. He told me that he knew he had been extremely disrespectful to me by asking me to reschedule my wedding and going on the camping trip, and that I was completely justified in doing so, but he truly regretted everything and wanted one more chance. He told me he didn't even care if no one came. He just wanted another ceremony, so he could at least feel satisfied that he had been given the chance to walk me down the aisle. He seemed very eager for another chance, which upset me because I thought maybe my dad wouldn't have cared this much. If I hadn't asked my stepdad to walk me down the aisle, I went ahead and asked him if would he have returned so swiftly and acted in the same manner if I hadn't asked my stepdad to walk me down the aisle in his shoes, or if he hadn't cared. That seemed to cause him to reflect for a little while, and that was all I needed to see. It was clear that this was more about him versus my stepdad than it was about him caring about me, and I told him that he had truly let me down and that I wasn't going to have another wedding for his sake. Blew it, and now I just wanted some quiet time away from him. I asked him to leave politely, but he ended up crying and pleading with me to forgive him. He said that he was truly sorry for not putting me first, and that he simply hadn't realized that I was going to hold the wedding. He and my brother took the next bus home after seeing the pictures I sent him, but when I insisted on, he became somewhat offended and told me that I couldn't treat him this way over a single mistake. I became very irritated and told him that if he could treat me badly throughout my life without a good reason, then I had the right to do this to him, especially since he had given me more than a few reasons by then. I told him that I just wanted him to leave because I wanted to enjoy the day of my wedding to the fullest. He truly deserved it for everything that was going on with him right now. I told him that I wanted him to stop, and that I was happy that I had asked my stepfather to walk me down the aisle, because despite the fact that he wasn't blood related to me, at least he cared about me, and it wasn't just for show like it was. With him, I then went inside the house while he kept crying, and when I looked out after a while, my brother and my dad were gone. Many years have passed since that incident, and I still feel somewhat guilty about what I said. I feel even worse about making him cry. Am I wrong to have asked my stepdad to walk me down the aisle rather than my father, and then tried to make him feel bad about it? Update 1. Hey everyone, after giving it a lot of thought, I've decided that I have nothing to apologize for, because my dad chose to reschedule my wedding so he could continue. I'm tired of making excuses for him, because I've done it all my life. There is simply no justification for this kind of behavior, and I don't have to forgive him if I don't want to. I feel bad for making him cry, but in all honesty, there's only so much abuse that people can put up with, and after that, I believe they have the right to make that other person cry. During my childhood and adolescence, I've cried over his treatment of me on multiple occasions, but I've never let anyone know about it, not even him, and I don't think he would change anything, even if he did. As a result, I'm pretty happy with my decision to not get in touch with him again. I've discussed it with my husband, who believes I made the right choice, and the only reason he hasn't said anything yet is because he didn't want to influence my decision. He wanted it to be mine. Only mine. I even talked to my stepdad about it because I felt like I was kind of betraying him by using him to get even with my dad. I felt like I should apologize to him, but he said it didn't matter because at least he knew that he was the first person I thought of after my biological father, which I suppose is true. In addition, I truly do value him, and both he and I are aware of that, so it's good for everyone in the comments. I guess it's obvious that my stepdad doesn't mind, and as long as he doesn't seem offended, I'm okay with what I did. In any case, it's been a few days since my wedding, and my dad has been phoning me at least once a day, and trying to text me multiple times. I haven't answered, and I haven't even opened his texts, so I have no idea what he's trying to say, and I really don't want to find out that I'm going on my own. Update 2. My husband and I are heading on our honeymoon in a few days, and I want to take a break from these thoughts for a bit. My dad called me this morning, but I let it ring before checking the messages he had sent me so far. I believe I mentioned in my previous post that he had been calling me every day since the day of my wedding, and the timings would always be the same. Differ, but he would call. I hadn't read through his messages yet, but today I did, and they were all the same, albeit with different wording. He told me that he truly valued me, and that he was sorry for everything. He also acknowledged that I had been right to be upset, and that he knew he hadn't been the best father thus far, but he just wanted one more chance to make things right. He had always been biased towards my brother, and he knew that I was upset, but he really wanted to be a part of my life as my only surviving biological parent, and he said that he was ready to do whatever it took to get me to forgive him. I Felt really sad reading those messages because the situation itself was just so upsetting, but I had decided that I needed to forgive him. I decided to call him back after reading those messages because I needed some space away from him. He answered almost immediately and apologized, but I told him that I was only calling to let him know that I was going on my honeymoon and that I wanted him to stop calling and texting for a while. I told him that I had read his messages and that I knew he was sorry, but I needed him to stop for a while, because continuously apologizing was not going to change whatever had already happened. He was only going to keep everything in my head, and I didn't want that, so I told him that I would call him myself when I was ready to talk to him, but for the time being, I wanted him to stop attempting to get in touch with me. If he was angry about what I had said, he didn't show it in his voice. Instead, he told me that he could understand and that he would wait for me to call him again. That was that. And now I'm really looking forward to the honeymoon, that I can forget about all this drama. Update 3. Hello, I'm on my 3rd day of my honeymoon, and my father has been keeping his word. He hasn't attempted to get in touch with me once, but surprisingly, someone else did today, and it was completely unnecessary and unwanted. I'm talking about my brother, who called me this morning to give me a lecture about the value of family, and to tell me that the way I was treating when I heard him on the other end of the phone. I was about to hang up, but he said that he knew I wanted to hang up, but if I did, it would just prove that I was an escapist. I'm not sure why, but it worked because he just knows how to push my buttons. My father was awful, so I needed to apologize to him as soon as possible. He had called from a burner phone, so I didn't even recognize the number. I don't know why. He felt the need to tell me. It's not like we're in school right now and are back to the stage where we were picking sides during the divorce. I told him that he needed to stay out of this because this was between my father and me, and he told me that because of my decision to stay, I couldn't just run away from the family I had, and whether I liked it or not, my dad was going to be my dad, and my stepdad could never replace him. I couldn't just take it out on our father, because it wasn't his fault that he wanted to prioritize the child who had truly always been there for him, unlike me. But he told me that he knew for a fact that I was always jealous of him, and that he couldn't do anything about it. This was between all of us because my dad had been miserable, and even the camping trip had been cut short because of this, ruining his visit, had betrayed him during the divorce, and I was shocked by how foolish and childish he sounded. However, I explained to him that this kind of behavior was normal for a man-child like him, and I also made it clear that I wasn't at all envious of him. In fact, I pitied him because, despite his professional success, he was still emotionally stunted, meaning that no matter what he accomplished, he would always be unhappy and unlikable. He was about to argue, but before he could, it was pretty satisfying in its own way that I cut him off before he could say anything. I told him that if he argued, it would only prove my point that he was miserable, and he was desperate to prove that he wasn't. I shouldn't have spoken to him at all, but at least I got back at him. I've also decided that for the remainder of the trip, I won't be taking any calls unless it's an emergency or something. Update 4. We were still on vacation mode after I returned home from my honeymoon a few days ago, but yesterday my husband had to return to work, and so did I. Since we're starting to settle back into our old lives, I thought it was time to talk to my father and confront him. So I went over to his place after work today. He seemed surprised to see me there, of course, and my brother was there as well. But I chose to ignore him because he's not very important to me. I also requested to speak with my dad privately because I didn't want to talk to him in front of my brother because I knew he would find it impossible to keep quiet and would try to keep interrupting. I didn't have the patience for that, and he didn't seem very happy about it, but he had to agree to return to his room so that my dad and I could talk privately. Once we were alone, I told my father how disappointed I was in his behavior because I had assumed that things were finally improving between us because we had been getting along well for the past few years, which is why I had asked him to walk me down the aisle. However, when he asked me to reschedule, I understood where his priorities were. I felt that asking my stepdad was petty and vindictive, but he is also important to me. So I told him that I was still unsure if he had arrived that day because whether it was because he truly regretted missing my wedding or because he felt competitive, my stepdad was walking me down the aisle instead of him. Regardless, I told him that it didn't really matter at this point, because whatever happened, we couldn't change it. He seemed very upset until that point, but I then told him that the only way we could deal with this was by starting over. I know that people would want me to cut. As someone who lost her mother to cancer, I know how cruel life can be, and how quickly people can be taken away from you. Regardless of how he has behaved in the past, or even recently, I have had good times with my father, and I can't disregard all of that, but I also can't disregard the bad times. So I had to come to a place of acceptance, and I told my father that I couldn't keep him out of my life forever. Father, going forward, I would be willing to try to make amends for everything he had done wrong, but for the time being, I wanted him to keep his distance. I told him that I needed time to heal, and he needed to be willing to give me that time. It might take a few weeks, months, or even years, but once I felt better about him and our relationship, we could try to create a father-daughter bond work. Again, until then. So I just wanted to keep a low profile. When I asked him if that was okay with him, he simply nodded. Then, before I left, he asked if he could give me a hug, which was a little emotional, but I didn't. I cried until I was back. In my own automobile, nevertheless. That's the choice we arrived, and I suppose it at least works. Right now, it does.